Then suddenly, for the first time since I got married, I found myself completely on my own. Eric was on a reading tour in Germany. David had found somewhere to live, and the younger children had for the first time all been invited on various holidays without me. I still thought the marriage wouldn't last, but even so, I followed Eric despondently to Heidelberg. On the way, I reviewed our problems. There were the usual troubles with children, exacerbated in David's case by his having been sent to live with us, moving first to Denmark away from his father, then back again to England, and finally by Nan's death. That's my mother. He had vented his anger variously on her, on me, on the cats, and particularly on his little brothers, Klaus and Tom. There was also trouble with my mother-in-law, Nellie. She had seemed to like me at first, but after she moved in with us, she turned against me, and our relationship deteriorated into a kind of guerrilla warfare. I never took it very seriously and quite enjoyed the skirmishes, but I think for her it was deadly serious. Then there were the problems of the liaisons, Eric's liaisons and mine. As I waited for the train to take me to Heidelberg, I reviewed these too. I had long ago decided that for someone as basically weak-willed as myself, it would be counterproductive to fight the combined factors of Eric's huge personality and the many adoring females at his feet. Also, this took place abroad, where he read his poems about love and life and war to audiences of thousands, or in little stuffy bookshops where most of the adoring females gathered. When I got to Heidelberg, I told Eric about my fears that our marriage was foundering. Typically, he did not offer to change our way of life, nor also typically did I ask him to. What he did was to enfold me, making a nest for us both in a borrowed flat with a borrowed car, doing this shopping himself and cooking up meals from tins of baked beans. I was touched by this mixture of the flamboyant and the banal, an echo of the way he'd so lavishly wooed me when we first met. It should have been suffocating, but it wasn't. For all his huge ego, Eric was rarely emotionally overpowering or intrusive. It should have felt like a sidestepping of the issues which had threatened our marriage, the things which I had been mulling over on the journey, but in truth, I was lulled by his sweetness and charmed by the view of the river, over the river Neckar, to a castle on the opposite bank from the village where we were staying. The underlying contradictions were still there, though, and not so underlying either, but right in my face. While Eric was so assiduously caring for me, he was also, as ever, working. And at that moment, what he was working on were the page proofs of his latest book of poems, called simply Love Poems, and mostly written to another woman. This was not one of the adoring females from the stuffy bookshops, whom, to be fair, he did manage to, in the main, avoid, but someone of an altogether different caliber, someone whom I also liked very much and admired. It was this relationship which had engendered most of the poems making up this collection, a hugely successful book as it turned out, selling hundreds of thousands of copies. Eric made no bones about the time and concentration he was lavishing on his page proofs. He was invariably very fastidious about these things. The poems themselves were a chronicle of a love affair, with all its depths and its absurdities, and as such, deeply personal. He was a poet as a lover, but he was at the same time the completely professional writer. The poems had to be published and the resulting book carefully crafted. Ultimately, everything for him took second place to writing, then publishing the work, and finally, of people reading and listening to what he had to say. So why do I call this little holiday my honeymoon? And what was I actually thinking in that mountain-fast eyrie above the river Neckar? And how did I accommodate myself with these discrepancies? My thinking probably went something like this. Eric didn't own me, and I didn't own Eric. We had by now been married long enough to know that we could make room for different relationships and still remain loving and loyal to each other. Though, of course, it would be wrong to pretend that this wasn't complicated and never made for trouble. During the days that we had spent alone together, magically unencumbered by family pressures, I had glimpsed again the sweetness of Eric's love and commitment to me. The marriage itself had not been unraveling, I realized. It was the traumatic events of the past year which had been suffocating the relationship. Eric had been totally preoccupied with his efforts to save Nan. When she died, he shut himself in his study and howled like a starving dog. Back in England, the family reassembled. Eric was by now reconciled to David's leaving home, and we were pleased to find he'd moved into a new and more comfortable squat. I collected the twins from their woodcraft folk camp, and Petra was back from France and about to start at her new secondary school. It was only years later, when the children were old enough to look after themselves, that I managed occasionally to leave them and accompany Eric on some of his trips abroad. In the meantime, we reverted to our old marriage routine, those stolen moments alone in the car, together en route to the shops or the children's school.